reporting from Jonathan Swan of the New York Times, and a lot of the environment as Trump's war hits the 6th month. New escalations, more countries drawn into the conflict. Iran launched a surprise missile attack on the U.S. The Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen going after a Saudi Arabian oil tanker. The hostilities spreading with no end in sight. Trump knows the war is deeply unpopular. This came up on Fox.
So the World Cup was with all the Trump people.
Yeah.
So Jared talked to everybody. So I was asking, I'm kind of like the idiot that asks real questions when people should be hanging out. And he said, I realize the war is not that popular. I also realize it's necessary.
The ripple effects of the war are clear. Most Americans now disapprove of Trump's job performance. It's gotten worse during the war. 3/4 say he's focused on the wrong priorities. And we hear so much about the MAGA base, but that narrative has crashed. Fewer than 20% of Republicans are enthusiastic about the rest of Trump's term. He simply does not have the hardcore MAGA support, which would put up with almost anything he did, that existed in the first term. And then there's a decline in Trump's key voting blocs. Remember, over half of Gen X voters went for Trump in 24. 54% crashing now to 33. That's a warning sign because Republicans would need those voters to hold Congress or at least stem their losses. When you look at places like Texas, Trump's base is angry.
This is a disaster. We are facing tyranny.
It is kind of crazy, dude, how mainstream, how unpopular Trump is.
The big, beautiful bill, which Trump is talking about on the stump, has a terrible reputation. People don't like it. Even Trump's base doesn't like it.
When we're talking about like hardcore Republicans, and even these guys are like, I can't do anymore with Trump. I feel betrayed.
I'm calling for it right now. 25th Amendment, impeachment, whatever needs to happen.
When Alex Jones sounds like the liberal Midas touch, well, we're in some kind of topsy-turvy place heading into the midterms. Trump holds off on a major Iran escalation. You wrote that him and his aides are uneasy about a widening war, the alienation of key Gulf allies, a global economic crunch, and growing energy and refugee crises. As always, interesting to get a view from inside and what your sources say. You can imagine many foreign policy experts and critics would say the list of things you report from them were reasons to be more dubious about starting the war. Do you detect a shift in sort of realism or skepticism about what they're doing over there?
Well, the other thing which is really important and has become a huge issue internally, I mean, they're arguing publicly that it's not an issue. They're saying it's all lies, but we know from our reporting it's absolutely an issue, is they're running out of weapons. Really profound problem with the supply of interceptors, Patriots. We have depleted our supply. It was already pretty bad before the start of the Iran war, and it's just gotten substantially worse throughout the war. We've hugely drained America's stockpiles of long-range weapons. These are the kinds of weapons that, God forbid, if we ever got into a conflict with China, we would potentially need them. So they're facing real constraints as well. And last week, Trump's team presented him with a plan for what would have been a major escalation against Iran. Very substantial escalation, huge increase in the amount of bombs and missiles they would be firing off throughout Iran. You obviously saw some of what they were doing. They were starting to hit civilian infrastructure, bridges, the potential later on for energy infrastructure. And look, Trump hit a point, based on our reporting last week, where he wasn't willing to tolerate that level of risk that it would have entailed.
Because?
Well, he said this many times privately and a few times publicly. He doesn't want to be Herbert Hoover. Okay, he said that many times. And the CIA and other intelligence estimates predict that if they do go ahead with such a massive escalation, that Iran will retaliate, will potentially hit American affiliated businesses in the Gulf, tech companies, financial institutions, not to mention attacking Gulf energy infrastructure, Saudi oil infrastructure. you could have a global economic calamity on Trump's watch. And that's before you even get to what I just started talking about, which is the very real weapons constraint. So that's the landscape he's facing. And he's in a really difficult position because, again, you said it in the setup to your question. All of this was not just predictable, but it predicted. Actually, he was warned about the munition supply. He was warned about the potential for the Strait of Hormuz to be shut down. What happened was Donald Trump believed at a very core gut level that none of these things would happen because the war would be over quickly, because he believed that the U.S. and Israeli militaries would crush Iran so quickly that none of these things would come to bear. But of course, that was a miscalculation, that we're now seeing play out 5 months later. And
when you talk to people, what is the actual learned reaction to all this? Because the irony is that Trump politically understood why these Mideast adventures were unpopular and ran against them. And then he had to move all the way to launching one. And the people around him, you and I have observed this, reported it, dealt with them. They have all kinds of, the most diplomatic way to put it is creativity for explaining him. But bottom line, 2024 Trump was right. 2026 Trump, by the measures you mentioned, was wrong about starting the war. And now you got people around him trying to get him back to where we started, but with an open-ended war and a problem in the Strait.
Yeah, I mean, the problem they face is there's just no easy answer right now. They're in this situation, and Iran, as the horrible cliche goes, has a vote. You keep it, but they do. I mean, they're firing off missiles. Yep. They're not. And by the way, the other issue, which seems obvious, but I don't hear it get talked about nearly enough, is how do you negotiate anything with a party where, I'll talk to advisors of Donald Trump and they'll say, the problem is we'll pass on a message and, they're all in bunkers. They're using couriers. The Ayatollah will take a while to get the message back. It's like, yeah, because you killed a whole layer of leadership. I mean, both previous rounds of negotiations were interrupted by American and Israeli strikes. So, yeah, it turns out when you kill the people that you were supposedly going to be negotiating with, it does take longer. It is more complicated to negotiate with the next group of people.
Yeah.